CPD and Registration Unit at the South African Pharmacy Council. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you. We thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and join us for this masterclass. Welcome to this masterclass. The masterclass will be approximately 2 hours. If we can urge you to stay until the end, because there's important information up until the end of the presentation. Right, I'm just going to quickly then share my screen so that we start with the masterclass. Right, I hope everyone can see my screen. As I've already introduced myself, my name is Mukwari Mohano. I'm the Senior Manager in the CPD and Registration Unit, and I will be taking you through this masterclass today. Thank you. In terms of the outline of my presentation, we will look at the CPD requirements, we will look at the annual declaration and designations of persons. We'll also look at the CPD essentials, things such as competency standards, domains and competencies, and we'll have a look at frequently asked questions and facts, and how one can learn in terms of CPD, and also what constitutes a good CPD activity. Learning activities, we'll look at evidence, and we'll also look at compliance and archives, selection of compliance year, and CPD submission deadlines, and also highlights. All right, in terms of the CPD requirements, you might be asking yourself, what is required for me to do to show that I'm participating in CPD? All right, with regard to CPD requirements, every pharmacist is supposed to submit an annual declaration by the 1st of February each year. And they are supposed to record at least 6 CPD entries per year, and they need to maintain an electronic portfolio of evidence. This evidence should not be uploaded on the system because Council does not require this evidence at the moment. So a pharmacist should keep an electronic portfolio of evidence safely on their electronic gadgets. Should that evidence be called upon by Council, the pharmacist would be required to submit such evidence. All right, just to mention that we do not accept manual submissions for CPD activities. Pharmacists are required to record their CPD on the SAPC website platform. Pharmacists are also encouraged to submit at least 1 entry every 2 months, just to ensure that there's consistency in the submission of CPD entries, and that pharmacists are not disappointed at the last minute when they are required to submit the full 6 months and something happens, that's out of the ordinary. Pharmacists then would have those entries submitted if they did submit 1 every 2 months. All right, with regard to the annual declaration, the annual declarations is based on the competency standards for pharmacists that were approved by Council in February 2020. And the competency standards comprise of domains, competency standards, and behavioral statements, right? We will go into detail in the next slides just to take you through what the domain looks like, or what the domain is all about, what the competency standard is all about, and also the behavioral statements. All right, a pharmacist then is supposed to select the activities that they participate in or that they engage in every day in their daily functions. And at the end of the completion of the annual declaration, a pharmacist will then be designated as practicing or non-practicing based on the selection of the activities that they perform. All right, for instance, if a pharmacist indicates that they do not perform any of the activities that are listed on the annual declaration, which activities relate to the scope of practice of a pharmacist, then that pharmacist will be designated as non-practicing, as they do not perform any of the acts that pertain to the scope of practice of a pharmacist. All right, and then the annual declaration must be submitted by all pharmacists by the 1st of February each year. Should a pharmacist fail to submit the annual declaration by the 1st of February each year, council auto-designate that pharmacist as practicing, depending on their compliance status in the previous year. For instance, if a pharmacist complied with CPD requirements in 2020, and they fail to designate themselves as either practicing or non-practicing by the 1st of February each year or the next year, we would designate that pharmacist as practicing, and they will be required to comply with CPD requirements for the new year. Right. According to Regulation 4.1 of the regulations relating to CPD or continuing professional development, a person may choose to be designated as either practicing or non-practicing. All right, just some definitions there. Practicing is that the registered person is currently, just indicates that the registered person is currently providing one or more of the services or performing one or more of the acts that pertains to the scope of practice of a pharmacist, as I've already indicated. And then for a non-practicing designation, it would mean that the registered person is currently not providing any of the acts that pertains to the scope of practice of a pharmacist. Right. So a pharmacist may choose to designate themselves as non-practicing if they do not practice any scope of practice of a pharmacist. All right. In terms of the CPD essentials, we will just take a few minutes to familiarize ourselves with the competency framework, which is the CPD guidance document. I'm just going to quickly stop sharing and just share the CPD guidance document for pharmacists to have a look at it, because there's a feeling that pharmacists do not necessarily know about the CPD guidance document. So I'm just going to quickly share. The guidance document is available on the SAPC website. It was published for comment. It was published for implementation in July 2020. So this is what the guidance document looks like for pharmacists. All right, I'm just going to go into just the index, and then you can read the rest of the document. All right, so in terms of the contents of the guidance document, we have in there the definitions. We have an introduction that talks to the CPD requirements and so forth, why CPD. And we also have powers of the CPD committees, a CPD committee that is listed in there. And just to explain why CPD is necessary and who must participate in CPD, and designation on the register of council, whether practicing or non-practicing. How does one designate themselves as practicing and non-practicing? And then access to the CPD recording system. It takes you through the steps of the CPD cycle. And it also looks at the requirements relating to CPD for persons registered with council, and implementation of mandatory CPD for registered persons. It looks at assessment for compliance with CPD requirements relating to CPD. As you might well know, that currently we do not assess the CPD activities for competence, but we do assess them for compliance. So it is important that pharmacists do comply to CPD requirements in the respective years. All right, there's also the recommended grid for self or peer assessment there. And we also look at non-compliance with CPD requirements. That explains information which relates to, in case of non-compliance, what would council do in order to to remedy the situation with pharmacists that are non-compliant to CPD requirements. And it also looks at appeals. How you can appeal a decision of council, what is the process that you need to follow to appeal a decision of council. There's also a deferment there. Should you fall ill, for instance, in the year, and you'd like to apply for deferment, it stipulates what you need to follow in terms of application for deferment. Deferment just means that you are delaying the submission of your CPD activities, or you are requesting counsel to allow you to submit CPD activities at a later stage, maybe due to ill health and so forth. So those are things that pharmacists are not aware of. To say that if you are sick or you fall ill and you get admitted, for example, in hospital for 3 months, and you are unable to perform CPD or to submit or record CPD activities, you are able to look and request for deferment. So all the information is contained here in the CPD guidance document. So I urge all pharmacists just to go and read through the guidance document, right? So I'm just going to go back to my presentation. All right. Okay, so we've looked at the CPD guidance document. Just to highlight the terms that you need to remember that relates to competency standard. There's what we call domain, there's competency standards, and also behavioral statements. So, all right. So you need to familiarize yourself with the competency standards for pharmacists that were published by Council in 2018. Right. In terms of the format or the structure of the competency standard document, we have an introduction to the domain, and it also explains how the domain applies to you. We also have the competencies that are listed under that particular domain, and also behavioral statements, which comprises of three levels. The first one is entry level. Entry level is a pharmacist who has just begun or who just registered with Council recently, and those are pharmacists who have been in practice for not more than 3 years, right? And then we have intermediate practice. Those are pharmacists who have been in practice and registered with Council for between 4 and 7 years. All right, and we also have advanced practice. Those are pharmacists who have been in practice for greater than 7 years. So these are pharmacists who have a lot of experience in the field that they are in, right? So I'm just also going to quickly share the competency standards before I go to the domains themselves, so that you can see it for yourself. The competency standard is also available on the website. Okay. All right, I can't seem to find it here on the system, but if I do, I will share it later. Let me just go back to my presentation. All right. So as I've already mentioned, that the competency standard comprises of domains, competencies, and also behavioral statements, right? In terms of the domains, we have 6 domains. The first one is public health. The second one is safe and rational use of medicines and medical devices. The third one is supply of medicines and medical devices. And then the fourth one is organization and management skills. Fifth one is professional and personal practice. And the last one, which is the 6th one, talks about education, critical analysis, and research. So it is important for you to familiarize yourself with the competency standards, or the domains and competencies that are in the competency standard document, which was published by Council in 2018. As I've already mentioned, that this document is available on the website. All right, so that is the summary there. the domain and competency explained, as I've already indicated there. You'd have an introduction. The introduction will explain what the domain covers. So in this instance, for instance, domain 1, which talks about public health, it says there, for example, it says the domain 1 covers public health and includes competencies that are required in both public and private health sectors, and promote health and wellness through the provision of healthcare information and education to the public and other members of the healthcare team. All right, so the domain has competencies, as you can see on the right hand side there in the table. Those are competencies that are related to domain 1. The first competency is 1.1, promotion of public health. So you will see if this domain or competency applies to your current area of practice, and you may, if it does, you may select it to capture or record your CPD activity. Right. Then the next domain is medicine information, and then 1.3 is professional and health advocacy, 1.4 health economics, and then 1.5 epidemic and disaster management. So we have been currently undergoing epidemic and disaster management in relation to COVID-19. And we also have primary health care, right? Those are competencies, as I've already mentioned before, that we also have behavioral statements that further break down the competencies. If you look there at the table on the bottom there, it says that a person who has achieved this standard is able to demonstrate the following behaviors: provide advice on health promotion, provide advice on disease prevention and control, provide advice on healthy lifestyle, and participate in public health campaigns. So you will see if the domain or the competency applies to your area of practice, and you may then submit CPD by selecting that particular domain. Right. These are some of the frequently asked questions that we receive at Pharmacy Council. All right. Pharmacists that are not working in a clinical setting tend to ask these questions. For example, one would ask, I only develop regulations. Is it necessary for me to submit CPD activities? Another one would ask, I'm a pharmacist, but not working directly with patients. There's another one, I research drug interaction and drug usage. And the last one there is, I train pharmacists or pharmacy support personnel. So there are many more to this. Just to mention that there's a domain for every activity that a pharmacy participates in that is related to the pharmacist scope of practice. So you are sure to find your domain that is applicable or related to what you do on a daily basis. For instance, I'm also in regulation, so we develop regulations for the practice of pharmacy. If you go to domain 4, you will see that it is there, regulation and so forth, development of policies and so forth. And for someone who does research and so forth, there's also domain number 6 that talks to research. So you just have to go through the competency standards and you'll find where you fit in there. All right. In terms of the facts, just to mention that pharmacy practice is not restricted to promotion or to the provision of direct clinical care only. As I've already mentioned, there are other areas of pharmacies that are not directly linked to clinical care. You can be a regulatory affairs pharmacist, for example. You can work for a medicine information center and so forth. Right. So there are other areas of pharmacies, and you do have an opportunity to submit a CPD activity because the domains cater for all areas of pharmacy. All right, so your obligation is just to choose a CPD activity that is relevant to your scope of practice, and you are not restricted to choosing a CPD that relates to what you currently do. You can also select a CPD activity that relates to that will enhance your personal development. So it might not be related to currently what you do, but where you want to go as well. So you can select a CPD activity that caters to your future endeavors as well. And you may be asking, how can I learn and how can I obtain information that is necessary for me to submit a CPD activity? Council is not prescriptive on how and where to obtain information that relates to CPD. Just to explain what CPD is in terms of the definition there, CPD is the process by which a registered person maintain and enhance their competency throughout their professional careers. And it encompasses a range of activities, including continuing education and supplementary training. You may attend a CPD evening, for instance, which relates to continuing education, and you may come to record that particular activity on our website and retain the evidence should it be required by council in the future. Or you may engage in a supplementary training activity where you enroll, for instance, for a PCDT training with a university, or you do an immunization and injection technique course. For that matter, you can submit that as a CPD activity as well. CPD enables a registered person to develop in the area of practice and demonstrate competence. So it is a cyclical activity. All right, let's look at the CPD submission process. You are required to submit 6 CPD entries or activities. There are 2 different cycles to pick from. You may pick from the 4-step CPD cycle or the 2-step CPD cycle. With regard to the 4-step CPD cycle, there are no limitations to the number of CPD activities you may record. So you may record all 6 as the 4-step CPD cycle. All right, but you must take note that it requires planning, and also it requires planning because it's an active process where you have to reflect on what you need to learn, and also then to plan and implement and also evaluate what you have learned. All right, so as I've mentioned, that all your CPD activities may be based on the 4-step CPD cycle. And you also have the 2-step CPD cycle, because sometimes we do learn in a passive manner where we do not necessarily plan that we're going to learn a particular thing in the workplace, but sometimes we get opportunities to learn that are unplanned. So hence we have introduced, or we have implemented, the 2-step CPD cycle to say, when you are in the workplace and there's a training, maybe that is offered by the employer, and it was not initiated by you per se, and you learn something from it, you may still come onto the CPD system and record. So in terms of the CPD system, the 2-step CPD system, you'll only capture the implementation and also evaluation of what you've learned, right? But this one, the 2-step CPD cycle, is limited to 3 CPD activities per year. So it's a maximum of 3. So you may record 3 CPD activities following the 2-step, but the balance then would have to be the 4-step. All right, so it's up to you. So that is the maximum 3 CPD activities for the 2-step CPD cycle. Okay. As you are well aware, it doesn't follow any thought process. Right, I've already mentioned that we currently pharmacists are not required to upload any evidence on the CPD system, but they are supposed to retain an electronic portfolio on their PCs or wherever. Should it be called upon by council, they would need to upload it on the system. All right, the CPD cycle comprises of 4 steps. The first step is reflection, where you reflect on your practice, you identify your own learning need, right? And then the next step is planning, where you plan on how you're going to meet the learning need, or what you're going to do in order to address the gaps in knowledge or skill, right? And then the next step is implementation. You tell us what you did. Maybe you went to a seminar, a workshop, maybe you updated or you engaged with a senior staff member to get information. As I said, CPD is not about attending a workshop or seminar, so you could study or read a journal to enhance your information or your knowledge, right? And then the last step is evaluation, where you evaluate what you have learned or the skill that you have acquired, and you tell us about its impact on your daily practice. How has it improved your daily practice as a pharmacist? So it is a cyclical process. While you are evaluating, you might realize that you need to learn other things that relates to the subject that you have learned, and then it starts all over from reflection, planning, implementation, and evaluation. All right, I've already mentioned that the two-step CPD cycle only has 2 steps, which is implementation and evaluation. As I said, this is more a passive learning where you do not actively seek to learn something new, but in your daily practice, you come across some things that you learn every day. All right, so what constitutes a good CPD activity? All right, so we've given you tips on what would constitute a good CPD activity. So your CPD activity must have a learning title, and you must ensure that the title is appropriate and relevant to the domain. So it can't be something that's different from the domain that you have selected. All right, you must have a learning need there, where you address what knowledge or gaps you seek to fill. What knowledge gaps you seek to fill, or what skills gap you seek to fill. All right, so that must be reflected in your CPD activity. All right, and you must also select an appropriate learning method or activity, and whether this will be a measurable or non-measurable or structured activity. Measurable would be, for instance, you might attend a short course where you are expected to write an assessment at the end of that short course. That is what we call a measurable CPD activity. If it's non-measurable, most of the non-measurables you'll find in in workplace training and so forth, because you are not tested after you attend a workshop in the workplace or a training for that matter. Or it could be structured where you are enrolled with a provider or a higher learning institution, and you are doing maybe a diploma or a postgraduate qualification and so forth. All right, and your activity then must have a learning outcome, and you must explain what you have learned and how did it improve your skill or knowledge in that subject, right? As I've already mentioned earlier. So once you tick all those boxes, then you are sure that your CPD is your activity is a good activity, or CPD activity is a good one. All right. So in terms of the learning activities, then one can engage in, you may do a self-study. As I already mentioned, that you do not necessarily need to attend a course or seminar or a workshop, but you may do a self-study. You may also do a case study. You may attend a conference and so forth, or you may enroll for a short course. You may review an article, or you may be an invited guest to speak at a seminar or conference and so forth. You may use that information to record your CPD activity. Or you may be enrolled with a provider or a skills development provider, or a higher education provider or institution where you are studying, you are doing a postgraduate diploma or any other diploma, postgraduate studies like a master's and so forth. So that may be used to record a CPD activity. Right. In terms of the portfolio of evidence that you need to retain on your person and not submit on the SAPC system, is that the evidence must be current, it must be valid, it must be relevant, and as I've already mentioned, it should not be uploaded on the system yet. Right. Current means that the entry must relate to the learning that you did or you engaged in during the current year. So if it relates to 2022 CPD activities, then it must be within that year, the 2022, for example. Evidence can be any documents acquired in the learning process. As I've already mentioned, that you shouldn't upload this evidence on the CPD system, but you need to retain it on your own personal system should it be called upon by the Pharmacy Council. All right, you might be aware of this page because this is the old page. We have since revamped or updated the CPD system so that it's easier for you to track and trace your activities. All right, so this is the old page. If you click then on the annual declaration, this is what you would have normally seen there. You would see your 2020, your CPD compliance here. For instance, this one is 2020 there. You'll see the role, the status, whether it's practicing or non-practicing, complete, and you'll also see the number of entries on the system that have been archived. All right, so in this instance, for example, for this person, they submitted 26 CPD activities in 2020, and those activities were archived. So what normally happens is that at the end of each year, we do archive CPD activities so that we create space for new CPD activities for the new year. Right? All right, you will see there for 2021, this person submitted 10, and it gives you the status there. It says they're submitted for compliance. So it means this person did comply with the 2021 CPD activities because all of them have been submitted for compliance, right? But with this system, you couldn't necessarily view your activities. So we've added a view tab so that you are able to see or view your activities, the details of your activities that you have submitted. All right, so this is the new system. All right, so we've added a tab there. You can see there on that arrow there, it says view entries. So you can see that this person has 6 CPD entries for 2020 that were archived. They are able to click on view entries to view their entries. I'll show you the next slide where it shows you the details that are contained after you click on that view entry. All right, so that is that. It shows you the previous 3 years. For instance, 2020, 2021, and 2022. You can see for 2022 there are no entries submitted yet. So this is what you see after clicking on that tab, view entries. So it will be easier for you to track and trace your CPD activities. We've also numbered the CPD entries so that it's easier for you to see if you are compliant with CPD activities or not yet. So there we've got like 1 to 6 CPD activities. We have the domain that has been selected by this person. We have the domain competencies, the title of the CPD activity. We also have the status, which is archived, and the first submission date. So it shows you the first submission date, right, for each entry that has been submitted. So that is the information that we've added onto the new system. All right, we have also added the selection of a compliance year, because in the past you could not select the compliance year. For instance, you would, for instance, we all know that CPD runs over 2 years. So for 2021, the due date is coming soon, which is the 30th of April, right? But when you submit or during the beginning of the year, you had to complete an annual declaration for 2022, and all your CPD activities that you'd submit from henceforth would reflect under the 2022 compliance year, even if you were submitting them for 2021. So what we have done in order to separate the CPD activities is that we have added under the evaluation step there, which is step number 4, where you select the year of compliance that you want to submit that particular CPD activity for. So I've boxed it there in the orange box so that you can see there. You are able then to select the drop down there, drop down arrow, then you select whether you want to submit it for 2020, 2021, and 2022 or 2022, right? So that your CPD is allocated correctly to the correct CPD compliance year. I hope it makes life easier, because we used to get complaints to say, I've submitted my CPDs, but then they reflect under the current year, but I wanted to submit them for the previous year. So I think that would help to address the whole confusion with regard to compliance year of CPD. All right, so the CPD submission deadlines, right, 2021, for 2021 compliance year, we had a grace period that started from 1st of February to the 30th of April 2022. So the grace period ends on the 30th of April, which is next week or so. So it's important for you to go onto the system to check if you have submitted the required 6 CPD activities. We have made the system easier for you to check. So if you have not submitted the 6, please do so before the 30th of April 2022, because should you fail to comply by the 30th of April 2022, you'll be designated as non-practicing. Obviously, there would be a penalty for you to be designated back to practicing, in that you have to submit an application form, and the fee for that form is quite steep. So we urge you to comply with the CPD requirements by the 30th of April 2022. If you are a pharmacist with no other roles like RP or tutor. However, if you are a pharmacist who's an RP or tutor, in terms of the CPD regulations or legislation, we are not allowed to designate you as non-practicing. However, we will refer you for disciplinary action. So we'll refer you to a professional conduct unit, and disciplinary action will be instituted against you. So we urge you to please comply to these requirements by the 30th of April. If you could do it tomorrow and just submit them all, please do so. All right. And then with respect to 2022 compliance year, as you know that these run concurrently, because we started with 2022 and we still working with 2021 CPD submissions. So please, we urge pharmacists to submit at least 1 entry every 2 months, right? So that we don't leave it too late, last minute, because we know Murphy's Law, that sometimes when you leave things too late, at the last minute, something happens. For instance, most people try to submit their entries on the 31st of December, but because of the traffic, there was a system glitch and they couldn't submit. So it just happens that when you do submit at the last minute, something most of the time goes wrong. So we urge pharmacists to submit at least 1 entry every 2 months. In order to make your life easier, we will also send you reminders every 2 months, just to remind you to say, for instance, if it's in April, we will say, for example, that by now you should have submitted 2 CPD entries, and we'll list the number of entries you have submitted. So if you have 0, we'll say 0. And we'll ask you to then submit 1 or 2 entries depending on the period of the year. All right, and the submission deadline, which is the final deadline for 2022 CPD submissions, is the 31st of December 2022. So please do submit on time. You don't have to wait for the 31st of December. you can actually submit all 6 CPDs by June, right? If you have the activities, then we won't bother you with CPD. You will see it again next year. So we urge you also to talk to your colleagues to submit the CPDs on time. All right, just some highlights is that the SAPC does not use the point system, as you might well know, that you have as a pharmacist to record the CPD activities on the system, right? We do not allow also third-party entries. You cannot share your login details with the third party to log the CPD on your behalf. Please note that should we discover this, it is an offense, and you will be disciplined accordingly. All right, and we do encourage pharmacists to engage in lifelong learning. And we already know that you already do this. The only thing is you just need to record it on our CPD's platform. All right. So we will also, for those that are non-practicing, what normally happens is that once we designate persons or pharmacists as non-practicing, is that we send communication to the heads of pharmaceutical services to notify them that we've designated some of their staff members as non-practicing, and then you are not allowed to practice any scope. So you can't be in the workplace if you are designated as non-practicing. So it's critical to comply to CPD requirements on time, so that you're not, expelled or removed from the workplace because of your designation of non-practicing due to non-compliance to CPD requirements. All right, I've already mentioned that we do not assess the activities, CPD activities, for competence, but we assess them for compliance. There will be a time where we'll assess them for competence, but currently we are just trying to inculcate, a culture of CPD or recording of CPD by the profession and so forth. But there will come a time where we'll look at the CPD for competence. So those are just the highlights, right? And in order to facilitate and assist you even further, we have also developed the CPD or SAPC registration app. Right, this is a mobile app, so it's on the go. So you could be in public transport and so forth, and you can record your CPD at any time or anywhere. So you don't need a laptop to do so. All right. Just to mention that some of the things that the app contains or has, you will find on the app the digital registration cards. As you know, we no longer issue the manual physical cards. So the digital registration cards would be displayed on the app. Once you log on, you'll see it there. It will say that you are registered active if you are, and it will also indicate your designation, whether you are practicing or non-practicing. Right? We request you to upload your photos on the SAPC website, because it is important to do so. We do use the photos to verify applications and so forth. So yeah, so it's important because we try to avoid fraud, because some people tend to pretend to be other people while they're not. So we use those photos to confirm if indeed the person who applied for the application by submitting their ID and so forth is the person that is reflected on the photo that we have on our register. So please, I urge you to upload profile photos on your profiles. All right. You are able also to amend your personal details as well on the app, and also upload that photo. All right. You can upload your physical address and so forth. Obviously, you cannot change your surname, because you would need to submit an application to change your surname and so forth. You can't change your ID number. So these are some of the things that you can't change. You can change your physical address, telephone number, email address. Please, if they have changed, please go onto the app or the website and update them for us, because we use them to communicate with you important information. Right. And then you will find the CPD system on the app. As I said, you can complete your CPD activities on the go. You could be in a workshop, you could be in training, and you just log onto the app and capture or record your activity. All right, so we've made recording CPD activities simple enough for you to record it anywhere at any time. Any questions? I will take questions.
Thanks, Makwadi. The first question, great presentation, thank you. Can this session of training and awareness be used to load as a CPD activity?
Can you repeat that, Natalie?
Can this session of training and awareness be used to load as a CPD activity?
Yes, it can be. It can be used to load a CPD activity. Anything that you learn that you didn't know about that relates to the profession can be used as a CPD activity. As I said, we're not prescriptive on what you need to record as a CPD activity. Yes. So the answer is yes, Natalie. Thank you.
In what cases does counsel need the electronic evidence?
Once we start with the assessment for competence, we would require the submission of the evidence to be uploaded on the system, but we have not yet started with the assessment for competence. So once we do, we will notify the profession about it. Thank you.
If you chose a specific competency standard, must you address all the behavioral statements of that specific competency standard?
Yes, in terms of the requirements, interns are required to address 75% of the behavioral statements. So the same would apply. It's just that currently we're not evaluating or assessing submissions submitted by pharmacists. But when we do, obviously we'll have a workshop where we indicate that please, you need to your submission should cover 75% of the behavioral statements under each competency, under the competency standard that you select.
I tried to upload my CPD, but it said that it's been archived.
I'm not sure I understand the question because once you click on identify a new training need, you are able to record a new CPD activity. So what would normally happen is that if you leave a CPD activity incomplete by the end of the year, and we archive the entry, that entry will also be archived, right? So we urge you to submit your CPD activities on time and not leave it until the deadline has passed. In that way, you'll still be able to access your CPD activity the next time you log in. So it could be that the person the pharmacist did start or initiate the recording of the activity, but then they left it until the deadline expired or passed. Hence, it was archived with the rest of the CPD activity. It would mean the pharmacist would need to start a new CPD activity from scratch.
Thanks, Makwadi. The next question is from Prof. Naidu. What happens if you started research in 2021? The results of the research are only available in 2022. Will this not be current, or does the completion of the activity decide what's current and not?
You don't have to record the results of the research, but you can detail or indicate the steps that you have taken. You can indicate a step as part of the submission of your CPD activity. For instance, if you did a literature review, you can just tell us about literature review and not talk about all the others. Otherwise, it would mean that you would not be able to, your activity would not be valid. Well, it will be valid for the next year if you complete it in the next year, for instance. But you might not be able to cover the entire research in one activity. So if you can maybe talk about the steps that you followed. For instance, as I mentioned, that we're not prescriptive. So if you did literature review, for instance, just write about literature review and not write about the entire research, as it might, run over 2 years. Thank you.
How does one go back to add if something was insufficient?
All right, you are able to go back if you have not clicked on submit for assessment, the CPD activity. At the end there's a selection that you can make whether you want to submit for assessment or whether you want your CPD to await submission. If you have selected that your CPD await submission, you are able to go back to that activity and edit it at any step. So you can go back. You just have to go under my submission and select that particular activity, select the step that you want to edit, and you're able to do so.
How long does it take for compliance approval after submission of a CPD?
All right. What happens is that because the CPD system is a new system, so it's not automated. So what normally happens is that before we declare a person compliant or non-compliant, is that we take the list of pharmacists to the CPD committee. For instance, we're talking about now is the deadline is the 30th of April. So it means in May we have to have a meeting, CPD committee meeting, where we look at compliance statistics or rates of the pharmacist. And then only after that, and council has approved, we will then issue the CPD compliance letter and certificate. So this year we also issuing the CPD certificate, but it's just the confirmation certificate. So it's at the end of the CPD cycle that we issue the compliance or non-compliance. But obviously going forward in the future, once the system is stable and everything, we would like the system to issue automatically any person who complies or who submits 6 CPD activities automatically without having to go to committees and so forth. So they could be issued at different times for different people in future. Thank you.
What disciplinary action is taken against a pharmacist if you do not submit a CPD every 2 months?
All right. There's no disciplinary action that is taken against a pharmacist. We are just urging pharmacists to do it every 2 months because we've seen a situation where a pharmacist would have a tragic life event towards December or towards the due date for submission, and the pharmacist then fails to submit CPD activities, and then they would appeal to the committee to say I was admitted in December, but then the committee would come back and say, but you had from January to December, why did you not submit on time? So we're trying to avoid such situation. And also just to, advise pharmacists to submit at least one every 2 months to avoid, things like that happening. Thank you.
Can compliance with CPD activities loaded not be assessed more regularly so that we have an indication instead of ending up non-compliance?
We have updated the system so that it assists you to be able to track and trace. As I've already indicated there, you are able to check how many CPD activities you have submitted and how many are outstanding. We are also sending automated reminders every 2 months. We will be starting to send automated reminders every 2 months that will tell you how many CPD activities you should have submitted or how many are outstanding for the period that we are in. And yeah, so those automated reminders will come to remind pharmacists so that at the end of the compliance period, they comply to CPD requirements. Thank you.
Prof. Naidu would like to know, if a person is non-practicing but applies to do a locum, how will the RP confirm this?
All right. The RP can confirm this by searching on the website for the person. If you go under, okay, I'm just going to, all right, let me just display it so that it's easier for for everyone to see where to search. Okay, so this is the website. Okay, I'm just going to go. When you search on the search, when you search the SAPC website, this is what you'll come across. And then what you need to do is click on the members of the public, sorry, and then click on search the register. Okay, so I'm just going to search myself here. I'm going to click on registered person. I'll search myself. You can search using a P number or the name of a person. All right, you can see there, it gives my name there, and it gives the registration status. It says they're registered active, and then it gives the designation. You see, it says practicing there. All right, so that's how an RP is able to check if the locum is practicing or not, or is designated as practicing or not practicing. Thank you.
Sorry, Makori, I'm trying to find my place.
Okay.
Can one carry over other years' CPD activities?
You can't, because I already mentioned that you have to select the year that you are submitting for. So meaning that you can't. So if you submit, for instance, 10 for 2021 and you submit 4 for 2022, you won't be compliant. So you'll not be able to, we won't be able to move your CPDs from 2021 to 2022, right? So it's up to you then to comply and, capture the correct amount of CPD activities in the different years. Thank you.
I was studying abroad for public health and mistakenly designated myself as non-practicing because of my study, but the following year I registered as practicing. What do I need to do?
All right, if you were non-practicing in the previous year and you are practicing in the new year, it would mean that you need to comply to CPD requirements for the new year. However, because we do not all designate ourselves as practicing in the beginning of the year, like in January, you are, let's say you designate yourself as practicing in April, you are required to submit a prorated number of CPD activities. All right, so it means that you need to submit 4 for the year from the time. So you need to calculate. So if it's 1 every 2 months, so January to February is 1, right? March to April is another 1, right? So if you change your designation or you apply for your designation to be changed in May, it would mean that you have to submit CPD for the remainder of the year. And if you calculate it 1 every 2 months, it will add up to 4 CPD activities for that current year. So it's a prorated number. But if you want to submit 6, we do not, prohibit you or restrict you to the number that you want to submit. But the minimum that you need to submit in the situation would be 4. Thank you.
We have a question from Facebook from one of our council members. Ms. Shivambu asks, can we send info to RPs about the non-practicing pharmacist information?
Yeah, unfortunately, due to the POPI Act, we are not allowed to share information. We can only share information under circumstances where we get a signed declaration by the respective RPs from your province to say council may share information with you or with the employer. That's the only time we will share the information, in a form of a list with the HOPs or heads of pharmaceutical services. However, we do urge the HOPs. The HOPs can assign their RPs, for example, to go and search on the register for persons that are under the employ of the pharmacy. to check if they are designated as practicing or not. But to send bulk, list to the ops, unfortunately, the POPI Act doesn't allow that. Thank you.
Shouldn't a submitted CPD be approved within 30 days and not at the end of the cycle?
Thank you, Natalie. As I've already mentioned, that because this is a new process, ideally we would want the CPD activities. We would want, once you submit all 6, you get a letter of compliance or certificate of compliance. But because it's a new system and we need to check, for bugs and all these glitches that normally are experienced with the implementation of new systems, unfortunately, we are unable to do that at this moment. So, as I said, this process is heavily monitored by the committees and council. So it has to follow the new process for now until we get the system stable and right, where we would then automate the system to say if a pharmacist submits 6, they should be issued with a compliance letter and certificate. Obviously, we have to do QA to check that the pharmacist has captured the appropriate relevant information, and they just didn't type anything like gibberish for that matter to do that. Thank you, Natalie.
Must the CPD only be in pharmacy? What if you are working in clinical research? Is that acceptable?
It is acceptable. I assume clinical research is related to pharmacy. As I've already mentioned, the domain 6 covers issues of research. So it would be acceptable for you to capture CPD in that area. Thank you.
Ronaldo would like to know, if you use the CPD Masterclass as a CPD to comply, what evidence do you use? Just to confirm what type of evidence is needed.
All right, to comply, using the CPD Masterclass to comply, the evidence could be, you could request us to issue you with something to say that you attended this masterclass. But as I already mentioned, that currently we do not evaluate evidence that is submitted. But in future, obviously, we would implement something where we would issue you with some sort of a letter to indicate that you have attended a masterclass, which you can use as evidence to submit your CPD activity. So yeah, you can request us to issue with something, but as I said, currently we're not evaluating pharmacist evidence. And yeah, in future we would issue you with something to show that you did attend. Thank you.
There's a comment from Prof. Naidu. Thank you, Makwadi. Brilliant presentation and responses. The next question, can an M.Pharm degree be taken as a CPD?
Yes, it can be taken as a CPD under domain number 6 that talks to research. As I said, you could break it down, in parts. For instance, development of the research proposal. For instance, if that takes you 6 months or 8 months, you can capture that as a CPD. You don't have to wait for the entire research to be complete to capture as a CPD activity. So you can just break it down in parts. Right, so you can submit that as a CPD activity. Thank you.
If you are abroad, can you still do CPD?
Yes, you can still do CPD. It's up to you. As long as you are registered active with council and you want to remain active on the registers of council, you would be required to do CPD even if you are abroad, because we do not restrict. We don't say that the activity must be related to what you do in South Africa. You could be practicing as a pharmacist overseas. You can still record the CPD activity because it's electronic, so you can do it anytime and anywhere. Thank you.
I was only able to submit 2 CPDs for 2020 while I mistakenly registered as non-practicing. I could not load the remaining before it was archived. Does that mean I need to submit the remaining 4? And if so, will it still matter?
All right. If you submitted 2, I suppose you are designated as non-practicing. In that case, you need to check if your designation is still non-practicing, if you haven't applied to have your designation changed to practicing, right? Otherwise, you first need to apply for your designation to be changed to practicing. Obviously, there's a fee to be paid, and also you are still required to comply to the 2020 CPD requirements or to submit the outstanding CPD requirements for 2020. Hence, we made the system easier for you to select the year that you want to submit the activities for. As part of your application, we will check whether you complied or you submitted CPD activities for the year in which you are designated as non-practicing. If not, we will not process your application and change your designation to practicing. So yes, you still be required to submit the outstanding CPDs for 2020 only if it is cancelled that designated you as non-practicing due to non-compliance to CPD requirements. However, if it is yourself, but I doubt in this case, because a pharmacist can designate themselves as non-practicing, you are only required to submit a prorated number based on when you became designated as practicing on the register of cancer. Thank you, Natalie.
Question from Facebook. Archana Sridhar asks, good evening. Can a course, say for example, public health, that is partially related to pharmacy practice be used to record CPD entries?
Yes, anything that is related or any course that is related to pharmacy may be used to be recorded as a CPD activity. So as I said, we're not prescriptive. As long as it's related to what you do, your current practice or your future practice, it is fine. Thank you.
How fast can a pharmacist have their practicing status changed from non-practicing to practicing with counsel?
All right, our timelines for processing of applications is about 14 working days. So yes, if you do submit your application, you should expect it to be processed by within 14 working days, unless there's an issue with your application or maybe there's a delay. Yeah, we will endeavor to process your application within 14 working days. Thank you.
Can a new title, for example, Prof, be considered a CPD?
I'm not sure. It depends on what you are capturing, because you have to capture reflection. You must tell us a learning need from that. Identify a learning need. Tell us your planning. For instance, how did you plan? So I think, a title, I'm not sure. You have to do something to get the title. So it is that something that we interested in, and not necessarily the title. What you did to get the title, and then you can talk about it under reflection. This is what I did. How has it improved your practice being a prof, and so forth. So it's what you did to get that title of prof that we would be more interested in. Thank you.
How much does it cost to change from non-practicing to practicing?
All right, I'm not sure of the fee, but if it's a voluntary designation, let's say at the beginning of the year you designated yourself as non-practicing because you are not practicing, or you did not intend to practice any acts that pertains to the scope of practice of a pharmacist, then the fee is it's about 300 and something. I'm not sure of the exact amount, but if you are designated as non-practicing by council, due to non-compliance to CPD requirements, the fee is equivalent to the pharmacist annual fee. Thank you.
Question from YouTube, Marlies Bester. When doing a CPD from a medical journal, what evidence can be submitted when compliance will be tested?
The evidence it could be an excerpt from the journal. For instance, you can make a copy, but obviously you have to relate what you've captured in terms of the story that you've captured on the activity to that journal article. So it could be an excerpt where you can annotate on the excerpt and so forth to say, This is where I extracted my information, that fed into what I've captured under reflection planning or implementation and evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mokwadi. That brings us to the end of the question and answer session.
All right. Thank you all for attending. We hope to see an improved compliance by the 30th of April. If you can just ask your colleague and check with your colleagues whether they've complied. And I think, Natalie, if I'm not mistaken, we will post this presentation on the website. Should pharmacists need to refer to it.
Thanks, Mokwadi. Yes, the presentation slides will be up on the website from tomorrow. Just to confirm that a recording of this session is also available on our YouTube and Facebook channels.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, just to encourage you, please, if you can submit one entry every 2 months and ensure that your 2021 compliance, CPD activities are up to date. At least 6 should be submitted by the 30th of April this year, which is in a week's time. Please do so. Otherwise, thank you for attending and taking your valuable time to attend the session. I hope it was fruitful and beneficial, and that you will use the information going forward to improve compliance to your CPD requirements. Thank you. You must have a lovely evening until we speak or meet again. Thank you. Goodbye.